Here's a thought that should make anyone in Britain stop and think. We are less than 2 years away from a turning point that will quietly reshape daily life in this country. Not in some distant academic way, but in how you earn, spend, plan for retirement, and even whether building a future here still makes sense. Roughly 700 days. That's the window we're looking at. What's unsettling isn't just the timeline. It's the silence. Almost everyone is carrying on as if nothing unusual is happening. Very few people realize how close we are to a major shift, and even fewer are preparing for it. That's why on UK Economy Explained, I want to walk you through what's actually unfolding, not with panic, but with clarity. This isn't about a single policy mistake or one bad year. What's emerging is a cluster of pressures hitting at the same time. Think of it like several fault lines moving together. Each one is serious on its own. Combined, they change the ground beneath your feet. And the most worrying part? This process has already started. Most people just haven't felt the tremors yet. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear picture of what's approaching, why the timing matters, and what practical choices are still available while there's room to move. But stay with me, because the most important insight comes later, and missing it means facing the next decade without a map. Let me start with a quiet moment from last week that slipped past most headlines. One of the world's major credit agencies, Moody's, lowered Britain's credit rating from AA to AA-. That sounds technical, even boring. It isn't. Here's the plain English version. Global investors just became less confident in the UK government's ability to manage its debts. It's the national equivalent of your personal credit score taking a hit. And just like in real life, once that score drops, borrowing becomes more expensive. That extra cost doesn't stay on paper. It seeps into everything: public projects, infrastructure spending, interest rates, and eventually household finances. For years, Britain enjoyed near top-tier financial trust. That era is fading. What's troubling is not only the downgrade itself, but the reaction to it. Officially, it's being brushed off as routine. No urgency. No course correction. And that was the moment I stopped and thought, if this is being waved away, what else is being underestimated? This downgrade didn't come out of nowhere. It's not the problem. It's the warning light. The real trouble runs much deeper. Once I started pulling at that thread, a bigger picture came into view. Not one issue, but a web of pressures stacking up at the same time. 6 of them, to be exact. Let me start with a fact that should stop anyone in their tracks, even though most people barely react to it anymore. The typical worker in Britain is worse off today than they were back in 2008, once inflation is taken into account. 17 years have passed. Nearly an entire working lifetime for some people. And despite all that time, all that effort, pay hasn't truly moved forward. That's unprecedented. Britain has endured wars, financial crashes, and global upheaval before, yet living standards still tended to recover. This time, they haven't. We're standing still while the rest of the world keeps moving. And the reason becomes clearer when you look at productivity. How much economic value we produce for every hour worked. In the UK, it's barely grown at all. We're now around 20% behind countries like Germany and France. In practical terms, that means a job that takes 4 days elsewhere takes 5 here. Same effort, less result. Then there's investment, or rather, the lack of it. Among major advanced economies, Britain sits at the bottom of the table. Businesses are choosing to build elsewhere. New plants, new technology, new ideas. They're landing in places like Poland or Germany instead of cities that once powered Britain's industrial future. That's not coincidence. It's a vote of no confidence. Here's the uncomfortable truth few people want to say openly. Without growth, the system simply doesn't work. You can't properly fund healthcare. You can't support pensions. You can't maintain roads, railways, or public services. Economic growth is the oxygen everything else depends on, and we've been gasping for air for more than a decade. But even that isn't the part that worries me most. While attention stays fixed on wages and prices, a quieter shift has been unfolding in the background, one driven by numbers that don't care about politics or promises. Britain's birth rate has fallen to about 1.5 children per woman. To keep the population stable, we need just over 2. We're nowhere near that. At first glance, it might sound harmless. Fewer people, less strain, right? But demographics don't work that way. What's happening isn't a balanced slowdown. Younger generations are having fewer children, while older generations are living longer. The population isn't shrinking, it's aging. Right now, roughly 3 working-age adults support every retiree. That's already a stretch. In the next 15 years, it drops to 2. A decade after that, it's close to 1-to-1. 1 worker supporting 1 pensioner. 1 worker supporting 1 retiree. Pause on that for a moment and really picture it. One person's taxes expected to cover someone else's pension, their health care, social care, and everything in between, while also paying their own bills. That isn't harsh. It isn't political. It's arithmetic. And the numbers simply don't add up. At that point, the system doesn't bend. It snaps. We don't have to imagine how this plays out. Japan is already there. 30 years of near-zero growth after growing old before it ever truly grew wealthy. South Korea is even further down the road, with a birth rate hovering around 0.7. That's not a slowdown, that's demographic collapse. Britain isn't special. We're just behind them on the timeline, maybe a decade or 2, but heading in the same direction. Some people jump straight to immigration as the answer. But here's the scale of what that would actually require. To keep today's age balance intact, Britain would need roughly 1 million new people every single year, indefinitely. Not for a few years. Forever. Whatever your politics, that simply isn't a realistic plan. And, without it, the demographic math keeps tightening. So now we're staring at 2 problems that amplify each other. An economy that struggles to grow, and a population that's getting older fast. Each one weakens the other. And just when you think that's enough, there's another layer. Most people don't connect to this story at all. You can see it with your own eyes if you know where to look. Nearly a third of Britain's water is lost before it ever reaches a home. 30% vanishes through leaks in pipes laid down generations ago. Much of it still relies on Victorian-era infrastructure, quietly failing beneath our feet. Meanwhile, water companies have paid out billions to shareholders, while long-term repairs were pushed aside. The result? Some major cities could face genuine water shortages within the next 10 years, not because the water isn't there, but because the system can't physically deliver it. The same story plays out on our roads. The repair backlog runs into the tens of billions. Councils don't have the funds, so fixes get delayed. Surfaces degrade, potholes spread, and each year of neglect makes the eventual repair even more expensive. Keep going like this, and large parts of the road network become effectively unusable unless massive investment appears, which, so far, it hasn't. Then there's rail. Remember HS2? It was meant to be a statement of modern Britain. Instead, it's been scaled back so many times that its original vision barely exists. While we debate and delay, countries like France, Spain, Japan, and China have laid down thousands of miles of high-speed rail and moved on. Hospitals tell the same story. The NHS maintenance backlog has climbed past £11 billion. Leaking roofs, broken heating systems, wards and operating theaters, closing because buildings are no longer safe to use. This isn't theory. This is Britain right now. What genuinely worries me, and what we talk about often on UK Economy Explained, is what happens once decay crosses a certain threshold. You enter a vicious cycle. Things break because there's no money to fix them. The damage spreads, making repairs even more expensive. And because they're now more expensive, they get delayed again. Several parts of Britain's infrastructure are already trapped in that loop. And even if somehow every road, pipe, and building were magically repaired tomorrow, it still wouldn't solve the next problem. Because beneath all of this, the social fabric itself is under strain. And that may be the hardest crisis of all to reverse. This next one is harder to measure, but maybe the most unsettling of all. A child born in Blackpool today can expect to live 10 years less than a child born in Westminster. 10 years, same country, same era. That's not the mark of a developed nation. That's a system failing large portions of its own people. And it goes beyond geography. Trust in government, in parliament, in police, media. The NHS is collapsing. Why does that matter? Because when people stop believing in institutions, those institutions stop functioning. It becomes a self-fulfilling spiral. Political divides aren't the old left versus right anymore. They're far messier. Leave versus remain, young versus old, cities versus towns, graduates versus non-graduates. People are no longer just disagreeing. They're living in entirely different realities, unable to see the world through each other's eyes. During World War II, Britain survived unimaginable hardship because there was a shared sense of we're all in this together. That sense is gone. If serious economic pain hits now, there's no social glue to hold the country together. Just tribes squabbling over a shrinking slice of the pie. Crime tells the same story. Police numbers are down. Detection rates have collapsed. Most offenses are now handled with a simple reference number for insurance. And that's it. Basic security is failing. Where the state can't provide, private security steps in. We're already seeing a two-tier system emerge. Wealthy areas with guards, everyone else accepting crime as part of daily life. That's 5 crises down, but there are still 2 more that make the whole system even more fragile. The next one is a quiet but enormous risk: energy. North Sea oil and gas production has fallen roughly 75% since 2000. Britain went from being mostly self-sufficient to a major net importer. When European gas prices spiked in 2022 and 2023, British households saw bills tripled. The government had to throw tens of billions at subsidies to prevent economic collapse, money we didn't have, for a crisis we couldn't control. And the vulnerability hasn't gone away. Coal plants are gone. Nuclear is aging and scheduled to close. We're betting everything on renewables plus imported gas. One major supply shock, one infrastructure failure, and blackouts become real. It gets worse. Building the renewable future isn't just flipping a switch. Wind turbines, solar panels, batteries, they all require massive amounts of copper, lithium, and rare earth minerals. Britain produces almost none of these. We're completely dependent on global supply chains, mostly from China. Disrupt those supply chains, and the whole energy transition grinds to a halt. So now we have 5 crises: demographic collapse, economic stagnation, decaying infrastructure, social fracture, energy vulnerability, all interconnected, each making the others worse. And the final 2? They're what turn a series of problems into a potential national emergency. On UK Economy Explained, we'll explore what those last 2 shocks could mean for every Briton, and why understanding them now is the only way to act before it's too late. And then there's the final crisis, the one that changes everything about Britain's place in the world. Over the past decade, our international position has weakened more than most people realize. Brexit wasn't just a political choice. It reshaped our economy and influence. Leaving the EU, our biggest trading partner, meant trade slowed, investment dropped, and the smooth access we once had was replaced by paperwork, delays, and added costs. Our so-called special relationship with the United States is cooling too. America is looking toward Asia. Europe matters less. And Britain's role as a bridge between the US and Europe has effectively disappeared. We're now trying to secure trade deals with India, Australia, and other Asian nations. But as a medium-sized economy negotiating from a position of weakness, we end up making concessions and getting worse terms. Military strength has fallen alongside this. The British Army is smaller than at any point since the Napoleonic Wars. The Navy struggles to maintain ships. The RAF faces aging aircraft and recruitment issues. Yes, we still have nuclear weapons, but in conventional terms, we're a shadow of our former selves. Culture, soft power, and diplomacy can't protect you when hard security challenges appear, and being militarily weak while geopolitically isolated is genuinely dangerous. Here's why all 6 crises together are truly alarming. Individually, each problem, economic stagnation, demographic decline, crumbling infrastructure, social fragmentation, energy vulnerability, and geopolitical weakness, is difficult, painful, and expensive. Manageable if handled alone, But they're not separate. They feed into each other like a chain reaction. No economic growth means no money for infrastructure. Crumbling infrastructure makes the economy less competitive, deepening stagnation. Fewer workers and consumers worsen the slowdown. Social divisions prevent the reforms needed to address any of it. Energy vulnerability makes industry less competitive. Geopolitical isolation reduces foreign investment. Each crisis strengthens the others. It's a doom loop. And we are already inside it. A recent example shows just how close we are to collapse. Last winter, Northern Ireland's power grid nearly failed. Aging infrastructure, higher demand, and supply constraints pushed it to the edge. If it had gone down, hospitals would have run on emergency generators. Homes would have been without heat in freezing weather. Businesses would have shut, and food would have spoiled. They barely avoided disaster with emergency measures. And here's the chilling part. Nothing has been fixed. The same pressures still exist. Next time, they might not be so lucky. This isn't just a Northern Ireland problem. It's a warning for all of Britain. The next 700 days, the next decade, could bring more moments like this. Moments when multiple crises collide and the country faces choices it hasn't prepared for. On UK Economy Explained, we'll break down what this means for you and what actions are still possible before it's too late. This is just a glimpse of what happens when all 6 crises collide. Take council bankruptcies, for example. Birmingham isn't an outlier. It's the first domino. Dozens of other councils are on the edge. When a council goes under, it's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. Services vanish, libraries close, youth programs disappear, roads go unrepaired, social care drops to the bare minimum. And here's the vicious cycle. Young people leave in search of opportunity, taking tax revenue with them. Council finances worsen. More cuts follow. Even more people leave. The process feeds on itself, accelerating. Parts of Britain could become near abandoned, ghost towns where anyone with options has already left. It's not speculation. Some towns in the north and Wales are already showing this pattern. So, when will the worst hit? The hard truth, it's already begun. Collapse doesn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It's a slow, accelerating decay. Here's how I see the next 5 years shaping up on UK Economy Explained. 2026, more council bankruptcies. NHS waiting times hit record highs. Energy bills remain crushing. Real wages continue to fall. Social unrest rises. Not a cataclysm, just steady deterioration that everyone feels. 2027, the first major infrastructure failures. Could be a regional blackout, a water crisis in a big city, or a critical transport failure. Governments promise fixes they can't fund. People begin to grasp that this is structural, not temporary. 2028 to 2029, economic crisis hits, either imported recession or a domestic debt meltdown. Unemployment spikes. Debt servicing becomes unsustainable. Real austerity begins, not minor cuts, but actual slashing of core services. 2030 to 2032, social breaking point. Protests, strikes, possibly riots. Governments struggle to complete full terms because nothing works. Political instability becomes normal. 2033 onwards, 2 paths emerge. 1, painful but effective. Radical reforms restructuring the economy and society. 2, far more likely, managed decline into a middle-income country with deteriorating services and mass emigration of skilled workers. Now I know what you're thinking. Great, you've terrified me. So what do I do? Let me be clear. Here's what actually matters. Stop relying on the state. Pensions, healthcare, social care. Plan as if they may not exist in any meaningful form when you need them. This isn't pessimism, it's math. Build geographical optionality. If your skills travel, know where else you could live. Not necessarily to leave tomorrow, but have a plan B beyond hoping Britain recovers. Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and several European countries actively recruit skilled workers. They face challenges too, but not this deadly combination of crises. Invest in portable assets. Money in local banks, property tied to Britain, or anything that can't move easily is vulnerable. Assets that travel with you, international investments, portable wealth, skills, become protection. Property in the UK is local and illiquid. A house in Birmingham can't easily convert into cash or opportunity if you need to move. Think instead about international stocks, globally recognized skills, and professional networks across borders. Assets that move with you. Fourth, personal resilience. Energy blackouts, water shortages, and infrastructure failures are likely in the next few years. Having backup power, stored water, basic emergency supplies isn't paranoia anymore. It's practical preparation. Fifth, community. Strong local networks suddenly become critical when systems fail. Know your neighbors. Build trust and cooperation. Communities that act together survive crises far better than isolated individuals. Sixth, financial diversification. Don't keep all your money in UK banks. Consider holding assets in stronger currencies or values-preserving investments elsewhere. This isn't about fear, it's about not being fully exposed to Britain-specific risks. Seventh, use NHS services while they still work. Get necessary surgeries, checkups, and treatments now. Waiting lists will only get worse. Your health is one of the few assets that compounds over time. Eighth, plan your children's future with international mobility in mind. Languages, STEM skills, internationally recognized qualifications. Equip them to work anywhere. Britain in 2050 might not offer the opportunities it does today. Look, I'm not rooting for this. I'm not trying to accelerate it. I'm simply identifying patterns in official statistics, mainstream research, and observable reality. Everything I've outlined is based on facts. Could Britain reverse course? Technically, yes. A government could implement radical reforms, take short-term pain to restructure for the long term, and pull the country back. Possible. But I can't plan my life hoping politicians suddenly become brave and competent. The most likely scenario? Continued gradual decline, punctuated by acute crises, until something finally breaks. Could be a debt crisis, infrastructure failure, social unrest, or just slow erosion until Britain is no longer a first-world country by any meaningful standard. Here's the crucial takeaway. Individuals who see this coming and prepare will fare far better than those who assume normality continues. That gap between awareness and ignorance, preparation and hope, is the difference between security and devastation. This isn't pessimism or optimism. It's pure realism. Britain is staring down 6 crises, all connected, all feeding into each other, with no clear solutions in sight and little political will to even try. That's not stability. That's decline. The UK we've known for the past 75 years, prosperous, stable, a first-world nation with rising living standards and robust public services, is ending. What replaces it depends on decisions being made right now. But those decisions aren't being made wisely, and in many cases, they aren't being made at all. You can't control the government. You can't magically fix the NHS, pensions, or crumbling infrastructure. But you can control your own preparation, your own plans, and your own positioning for what comes next. The real question isn't whether Britain is about to collapse. It already is. The real question is, what are you going to do about it? Because the collapse is happening gradually, quietly, slow enough that most people haven't even noticed yet.